the most successful firms, whether it's finance and, an actual operation department or a corporate and a park dynamic, are ones that are recognizing where their strengths can help people in the field, and recognizing where the people in the field, doing the day-to-day are seeing things that maybe don't show up in the numbers or on a spreadsheet.
Every year, millions of attraction visitors lose hours in line instead of making memories.
Since its inception, Accesso's virtual queuing has saved more than 4.5 billion, yes, that is billion with a B, minutes of wait time, freeing guests to pack their day with more rides, eats, and excitement.
The result? Happier guests who spend more and a better bottom line for you.
Ready to turn waits into wins? Visit accesso.com/ROI clinic.
The queues are virtual. The results are real.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically, Josh. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing really well. Question for you.
Yep.
You've worked in theme parks and attractions before, right?
Yes.
You were mostly like operations and HR. You're like the people side of the business, right?
100%.
I don't know why I'm asking that as a question. I've known you for almost 20 years. You ever dabble in finance?
I've had to, yes.
Ooh,
Yes.
go on.
So when I took over as an operations area manager at Valley Fair, I suddenly became in charge of an area that sold things. So I had to understand finance from that point. I was also responsible for the admissions area, which wasn't so much about finance, but that other area where we were selling candy and food and that kind of thing. Yes, I had to understand what COGS were and those type of things. Yes.
The reason I ask is because a lot of times when we think of operations in a theme park or a large attraction and we think finance, we're probably thinking silos in some way, shape, or form. Yes, of course, there's a little dabbling back and forth, but oftentimes they might be departments that might not necessarily have that much interaction with each other. And I try to say that very loosely in a lot of mights and maybe nots, and generally speaking.
Well, and what my experience is the interactions that they do have can be volatile because operations is looking to do one thing, finance is saying you can't do that, or let's look at it a different way. And that's when those silos can then turn into people butting heads. What I really appreciate about our guest today, Tyler Rizzo, who's the VP of Finance for COTALAND and has been responsible for lots of financials in various theme parks around Florida and other places, is that he talks a lot about bridging the financial and operational departments. And he does this through being super collaborative, which are the words that he used.
Yeah. He also used the term not chasing expensive pennies. And I think that was an interesting conversation of saying, okay, what really are we focusing on in terms of trying to cut costs where maybe we're focusing our attention. We could focus our attention in areas that are generating more revenue, that are creating more revenue than the costs that we're trying to cut. And then maybe we should prioritize that and not necessarily chase those expensive pennies.
To me, it was kind of like big picture, small picture, long term, short term. Like that's kind of what was weaved into that conversation. And then he also talked about avoiding the doom spiral, which is, if you're seeing a lower attendance, then you're cutting your team members, and then you're getting lower attendance because your guest service has gone down. And so avoiding that doom spiral and sort of the financial implications of that.
Oh, yeah. So should we click open the cash register and get to this interview with Tyler Rizzo?
If you can find an actual cash register out there, yes, let's click it open. Let's go.
Cha-ching.
Hey, Tyler, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. How you doing today?
I'm great, Matt. How are you?
I am awesome. Thanks for asking. Would love to start off by talking a little bit about your career and what it is that you're doing now.
Yeah, so my career goes way back. I actually like to start in childhood. I grew up in Central Florida, visiting Disney and Universal and SeaWorld and Busch Gardens every school break, and that started a passion for the theme park industry, and had the opportunity to get my first job at Busch Gardens Tampa. Actually went in and interviewed on my birthday, my 17th birthday, and got a job pressing the green button at Congo River Rapids, making the ride go, and haven't looked back since. So grew up in front of house operations. Went to the Rosen College of Hospitality Management. Got a hospitality management degree to support the guest service side of things, and then a couple of years into my career, kind of stumbled into back of house analytics work. Started out as a scheduling supervisor for the call center. Got moved over into core finance, traditional financial planning and analysis through analytics for the SeaWorld parks. Worked my way up through the corporate ladder there. Spent some time with Cedar Fair on their in-park revenue analytics department. Helped set them up with some dashboards and some financial programming. Moved back to Orlando, rejoined the SeaWorld firm, and was director of analytics, director of food and beverage. Had a whole bunch of different opportunities. I kind of make the cliche that my career's been a tree versus a ladder. I've been able to climb several different branches that keep going up and gaining all these different experiences and opportunities. Spent the last few years out of the operations side and in the consulting side with Storyland Studios, where I was working on all sorts of pre-concept and opening family entertainment centers, theme parks, all sorts of stuff. Kind of the running joke in the design world is all of my best work is under NDA. All the coolest stuff that I got to work on is still under NDA. So I can't talk a ton about it yet, unfortunately, but did some really cool stuff. And all of this kind of, hodgepodge of experience in finance and operations and analytics have led me here to the COTALAND theme park, where I'm supporting the opening of the latest and greatest in the United States, a 30-acre, 30-ride theme park coming in 2026 to Austin, Texas.
That's awesome. So I want to highlight one point in your career journey here, and that's when you said you stumbled into back of house analytics. So for many of the students who go to the Rosen College at UCF, particularly in the theme park track, it's usually very operations focused, and whether operations or events or generally, front of house, certainly, not the case for everybody. But I'm curious as far as what led to that transition from operations to finance, and kind of how did you stumble into that?
Yeah. So, the first thing, what I'm eternally grateful for is, our degree had us take 2 accounting classes, right? So there was some base to that experience. But for me personally, it was a combination of, again, kind of that institutional knowledge and excitement, kind of the general, not necessarily a fanboy theme park knowledge, right? But an understanding of, what made theme parks work, what attracted guests, where they were spending their money, and then kind of a natural, strategic, asking the right questions, asking why things were operating the way they were operating, asking how they could operate better, and then being super collaborative with the actual operators of the experience. So it's again a combination of kind of a personal, knowledge and enthusiasm for it with a little bit of like kind of a natural strategic thinking to it.
So Tyler, I'm intrigued by the way you categorize kind of how you operated with finance and operations. You said you were super collaborative because before
Yep.
you had said that, I'm thinking in my mind historically operations and finance kind of butt heads at times.
Sure.
And so I'm curious if we can dive a little deeper into that super collaborative outlook and how you have bridged those two at times at odds departments.
Yeah, look, it's kind of a cliche, right? That finance is, and accounting departments are the bean counters. It's their job to come in and say no. And I've kind of always treated it like an improv group. You never say no, right? You yes and. So the most successful firms, whether it's finance and an actual operation department or a corporate and a park dynamic, are ones that are recognizing where their strengths can help people in the field, and recognizing where the people in the field, doing the day to day are seeing things that maybe don't show up in the numbers or on a spreadsheet. So creating those open lines of communications, making sure that leaders and department heads are involved in the decision making. There's the worst feeling in the world, in the corporate life is when you show up to a meeting and someone pulls out a spreadsheet or a presentation that you had no idea was coming, and you kind of get blindsided and are immediately on the defensive. So it's kind of always been my goal to make sure that doesn't happen, right? You don't want to surprise the boss, and you don't want to surprise your colleagues either, when you're trying to, all pull in the same direction. And the other thing that I, really try to strive for, and this is definitely where the kind of front of house origins shines through, is I try to get out there and get into the field as much as possible. One of my favorite things about SeaWorld was when they moved the corporate office from a couple miles down the road to right next to the park. That way, if you were working on whatever your problem of the day was and maybe weren't able to get a solution, you could always get out, walk into the park, hear the guests screaming on the rides, see the folks eating the good food. So I always try to get out and kind of walk the walk too, which I think helps with the barriers, right? If the folks out there are frying up the French fries, see you out there working the fryer too, or pinching in on the busy days, it helps with those relationships and keeps everybody moving forward.
And just being able to see the front of house operation, I imagine supports of everything that you're doing, in the back of house. I would also imagine too, kind of tying into the theme of being super collaborative, that your background in operations probably helped to really influence the way that you were looking at finance and perhaps maybe differentiated from others in that field. Did you find that to be the case as well, of being able to look at finance through the lens of operations?
Yeah, it helps. It helps with the street cred, right? If the people you're working with you kind of know the challenges firsthand, that helps with the credibility and the teamwork. But yeah, then absolutely right. If you there's kind of tacit knowledge. There's things that if you haven't been out in the field, or if you haven't worked in a theme park, you may not just inherently know or recognize in the numbers. And sometimes it's basic things, right? Like the seasonality of an experience, or the hours of operation. Actually being out in the field is super helpful when you get into the back and you start crunching the numbers. It helps you visualize what those numbers actually represent. It's one of the things that, again, super cliche, but why I love doing what I do so much is, the numbers on the spreadsheet are the numbers on the spreadsheet, but when you're in a park, you know what the end product is, right? You know what what the per cap is equaling out to in terms of, rides per guest and, food, number of chicken tenders eaten in a day and t-shirts and plushes bought. So it's super rewarding to have that experience.
So Tyler, over the last couple of years, at least I've noticed some posts from you on LinkedIn really analyzing the industry, right? And, earnings calls from different companies and how this impacts, another company and things of that nature. Some of it's way over my head, but I appreciate that you're putting it out there. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that you're hoping people take away from some of the things that you're analyzing industry-wide?
Yeah, I think that's where, where I try to always strike a balance, right? Is because we're in a really fun industry and that's, the end goal and where we get the value as companies. But at the end of the day, if the company and the firms aren't profitable or, hitting certain targets, it makes it challenging to provide that value and provide the fun and excitement for the guests. So, I think, one of the larger trends we've seen, at least, my lens is U.S. based parks, right? Just because that's where I live and that's where I work, is a lot of consolidation. Our industry is mature. There's not a lot of new parks opening. There's not a lot of kind of organic growth, right? The parks are in established markets with established visitation levels. So as these companies need to look for new ways to kind of turbocharge growth, mergers and acquisitions happen. And Six Flags and Cedar Fair merged a couple of years ago after a few years of flirting. And have made the largest publicly traded North American company. Herschend Family Entertainment has gone out and acquired a couple of individual parks, and then of course the Palace Entertainment parks. And these are all different ways of trying to grow and leverage up their size to make a better experience, whether it's getting a better deal on chicken tenders to lower their costs or leveraging their park portfolio to improve the guest experience through, passes that are good at multiple parks or different attractions. I think it's a trend that's going to continue, just based on, again, the maturity level of the industry. Excited to see how they continue to adapt moving forward.
And Tyler, you mentioned that there aren't too many new parks opening these days, particularly in North America, and that most markets are mature markets. And if we look at the state of Texas, there are definitely parks in San Antonio and there are parks in Dallas. And let's talk about Austin for a second. Tell us about COTALAND.
Yeah. So Austin is a vibe. I had never really been to Austin. I'd done San Antonio a bunch, through my time at SeaWorld. But the city's slogan, for those who don't know, is "Keep Austin Weird," and they live up to that hype. It's the live music capital of the U.S. At least. It's got more live music venues than any other city. And there's a lot going on. It's a growing city. The tech industry has really taken off post pandemic. The comedy scene has exploded. So the city itself is growing. Just taking a step back, trying to bring in the numbers to it. I was playing around on RCDB before I jumped on to try and see how many parks, actually theme parks are scheduled to open. And funny enough, COTALAND's already listed as operating, so it wasn't on the list. But, there's only a handful of them, there's not a lot of new theme parks opening anymore. So it's pretty cool to be a part of it. And COTALAND is, so COTA stands for Circuit of the Americas. It's a racetrack a few miles outside of Austin that's been around for a little over 10 years now and is most famous for hosting the F1 US Grand Prix on an annual basis, where we welcome somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 people over a weekend. So we're super busy. It's kind of like 2.5, 3 Super Bowls combined into one weekend. And the theme park's going to be a supplemental attraction to the racing events that happen, the motorsports events that happen throughout the year. It's going to be about 30 acres, going to have about 30 rides. So it's going to be a really dense, rides per area park. And yeah, going to be a kind of a little sample of Austin in a theme park form.
So Tyler, I think it's almost goes without saying the really unique part of this park that's opening up, COTALAND, is that it's associated with and kind of attached to this F1 racetrack. So what are some of the maybe advantages or disadvantages, or I don't want to say disadvantages, challenges of
Sure.
of a park being built there?
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities, and definitely some challenges too that we're taking as opportunities. So the first one is the brand. Having been able to visit and drive around Austin a bunch over the last few months, the COTA brand is an IP. It's an intellectual property around Austin. The people of the city know COTA and know what to expect. And then it also has some international appeal too, for the race, right? When the F1 race comes into town, there's visitors from all over the world that come. So it's exciting to be a part of that brand. Mention the F1 race and some of the other motorsports events. We have a built-in audience, right? A couple weekends a year, we're going to have more people than we know what to do with, getting on the rides and going to the concessions and the shows and everything. So super exciting to be able to leverage that brand and expand upon it. One of the opportunities is it's not a racing theme park. I think most people, when you talk to folks and you hear COTA, you kind of automatically assume F1, NASCAR racing, and there are going to be racing and car culture theming to the park. But like I mentioned earlier, it's more of a love letter to Austin, right? There's going to be different themed areas, different vibes to the park that go beyond the racing culture. And I think that's going to be a fun, opportunity and challenge to get out that marketing message and kind of explain to the guests that the story of COTALAND isn't just race cars and car culture. The park's original vision was COTALAND Kiddie Park, until the owner and one of our operations leaders kind of took that thread and expanded upon it. So there's lots to do for everything. Every regional theme park has a kids zone, right? They have a Camp Snoopy or Looney Tunes Land, but they're kind of sequestered or segregated off in their own section, right? So if you're there as a family, maybe mom's taking the younger kids to go ride the family coasters when the older kids are going off to ride the big kid coasters. COTALAND has everything kind of sprinkled together and integrated. So families are going to be able to go station to station and experience things together, which is going to be super unique and awesome for the families. And then, again, while we're not all racing, racing is going to be an aspect of the park. I would absolutely expect us to leverage the access to, what many say is the best F1 track on the planet, and really find unique ways to get guests involved in the track. So our primary food and beverage restaurant is going to have a second story viewing dining area where you're overlooking the track with great views of turn 20 and turn 1. We already leverage the track for what we call hot lap programs, where guests can jump in a race car and have a professional driver take them around the track at some pretty crazy speeds. So lots of fun, unique opportunities to get involved with COTA proper, while COTALAND kind of retaining and building its own identity.
So this is kind of an open-ended question here, just knowing that the park hasn't opened yet. And there's a lot of pre-planning things, but I'm curious. I want to know, where is your finance/operations brain thinking? Like, what's making your head spin when you think about, all right, there's the kiddie rides that are integrated into the entire park, thinking about guest flow from that standpoint. You talk about the race weekends, that'll bring more guests than you know what to do with. Got to imagine you're thinking about distribution and dynamic pricing and things like that. You talk about the restaurant, the viewing of the track, that also influences race weekend, but is it just as powerful during non-race days and
Sure.
non-events? So like I said, very open-ended here, but curious as far as just like with all the things you just shared, where does Tyler's brain go with all that?
Yeah, yeah. So, my brain goes to kind of, connecting with the operations leaders and the entertainment leaders and my boss and the owner of Coda, and coming up with creative solutions. So I think what you're going to see is potentially completely different operating models depending on what's going on, right? The I think the vision is a long term, traditional gated theme park, right? But that model may not make sense when you need the midway as a access point to move guests from one section of the track to the other. So there's going to be lots of evolving, lots of testing and adjusting. We and industries mature. We got lots of great data. We got lots of great benchmarks that we can build off of and leverage to build a really, really tight plan. But at the end of the day, that plan is only as good as reality, right? So as we're building out budgets and forecasts, we're going to be making adjustments as certain things are more or less popular than anticipated, or spend is higher or lower than anticipated. So lots of adjustment. Again, collaboration is going to be huge. We have a whole team at Coda that's a motorsports / racing team, right? Like we have ex-professional drivers that I'm getting to interact with and come up with plans on, how do we maintain potential race cars and what type of operating hours and structures can we use for different programs. So lots of collaboration, lots of communication, and again, it's building out a plan and getting, leveraging my history and our team's history to get a budget as tight as possible, and then recognizing that once things start actually happening, we're going to be making adjustments pretty quickly, and making the best experience possible.
And it's an experience that we all look forward to experiencing when it's ready to go. Tyler, I'm curious if we can maybe switch gears just a little bit. We'll stay on the finance track. But one of the things that popped into my mind as you're talking about, all the different things you do from a financial perspective and the expertise that you have and the length of time that you've been doing this, is that there are many operational managers or even back of house managers that don't have that financial acumen. And I'm reminded of classes that we used to do, which was human resources for non-human resources managers. So I'm curious from your standpoint, from a finance perspective, what are the things that non-finance managers or personnel should really be looking at or concerned with that impact them on a daily basis that may not be to the level or depth that you would look at things from a financial perspective?
Yeah. Again, I mentioned the, 2 managerial accounting classes I got to take, as a hospitality management degree. Obviously, as I moved into finance, I supplemented that with an MBA and kind of some more technical support. But for any, current leader, front of house or aspiring leader, just recognizing the basics, right? Kind of taking a step back and understanding what your head count is, what your labor costs are. If you're in a food and beverage or a retail position, try to begin to understand what your material costs are, what your costs of goods sold are, because gaining that knowledge and kind of recognizing the impact, even if you don't have a expert level knowledge, will start to guide you into better decision making. One of the things I like to do when I'm talking with food and beverage leaders, for example, is quantify the food waste, right? So if we're measuring how many French fries we threw out in any given day, kind of extrapolate that to say, hey, you know, it's this many ounces of French fries per order we're wasting or losing or getting stolen, or the kids are eating right. Over the course of the day, it equals this amount of dollars. And if you multiply that over, you know, the whole season times 12 parks, and all of a sudden you're at $1 million in French fries that have gone missing, right? And those kind of simple examples help quantify it for front of house leaders and help get them thinking a little more strategically. So again, you don't have to have, you know, huge Excel skills or, you know, an MBA, right? Just kind of simple, you know, simple math, right? Hey, this person working 8 hours equals, you know, $160. I can multiply that out by a few people and start to understand the importance of working with the scheduling team to make sure you're staffed at the appropriate hours so there's not too much downtime. And then even conversely, right, making sure you have the right amount of people on staff when you're busy, so you're not having guests walk away from your line or potentially creating guest service issues.
What about then, and maybe this is like taking a step further, but really fully comprehending not just, you know, let's use $1 million of French fries as an example. Sure. That at face value, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of wasted French fries. But perhaps it could be relative to, well, we did $100 million in French fry sales this year. So maybe that's
sure.
maybe $1 million isn't as big of a number as I thought it was. So I've got to imagine that whatever the dollar might be, also really actually putting it in perspective with all the other factors that are at play.
Yeah, 100%. You know, it's kind of like the investor analogy, right, of chasing the pennies in front of the steamroller or the train. I think that, you know, that's kind of what separates maybe a true finance leader or, you know, an executive. Is bringing in that bigger picture, because you're 100% right. I've had multiple times throughout my career where we chase expensive pennies, right? Where a leader says, hey, we're losing, you know, 4 t-shirts a day to theft because the t-shirts are placed out in front of the store instead of, you know, in the store. And then when you go out and you quantify what your shrink is for a particular store, and then what the cost would be to add additional security, what your reduced sales are because the inventory isn't as visible, all those kind of additional numbers, it absolutely quantifies it and says, hey, maybe we can live with $1 million in French fries being, you know, wasted every year, or X amount of t-shirts being lost. So 100%, you know, that's kind of, if the French fry analogy we keep going back to is kind of 101, right? 102 is let's quantify it. Let's bring in the bigger picture. You know, let's examine what the actual cost benefit analysis is to reducing the shrink, or, you know, increasing the price of funnel cakes or whatever it may be.
And Tyler, across the board, have you found that there's an acceptable, you know, amount of shrink, or there's an acceptable amount of loss, a percentage or whatever, or is that kind of by company, by gut feel, by manager? Like, how does that determine?
Yeah, that's going to be a different answer depending on who you speak to, right? But, you know, that I don't know if I can quantify an exact percent, you know, right now, but there is, right? Any business, whether it's, you know, a theme park or Chipotle or, you know, Target, there's some acceptable level of shrink, of loss, you know, that goes into your cost of goods sold. That's where, you know, as a business that's gathers years of historical data, right? You know, most of the theme parks have been open for 30, 40, 50 years. You can track that and you can say, okay, historically, you know, we lose X amount of t-shirts per year, right? Whether that's internal theft or external theft or just accounting errors, right? I mean, and you can track that trend and you can kind of establish individual baselines for what's good and what's bad, and then adjust your training and your development from there.
And we've interviewed some, several business owners and some accountants over the years. And one of the things that I've heard a couple of times is about focusing much more on the top line than on the bottom line. And that a lot of times leaders get so ingrained in trying to protect the bottom line that they actually are missing out on opportunities on the top line. And I'm curious about your perspective on that, if that is true in maybe a small business operation versus a large scale theme park, or if there are nuances to that.
No, that's a great kind of analogy, and I think it's something you're seeing in the publicly traded theme park world today, right? Kind of tying it back into trends. I think the super large firms are maybe hyper focusing on the bottom line, and they're losing out on the top line, not only on just kind of like an opportunity cost of reducing hours or reducing labor, but also reducing the overall value perception of the product. It doesn't matter if it's a $15, a $50, or $150 attraction. I think the equation's pretty simple to be successful in our industry. You have to meet or exceed the value expectations that's the guests are paying. And if you don't meet them, you're going to struggle to retain customers. You're going to struggle to kind of get that incremental day of spend, and you're just not going to be as successful. It's why there's a little bit of bifurcation happening right now. You look at Disney and Universal, their numbers continue to just really pop. I think Universal, they had some margin compression earlier this year, right? Their bottom line was shrinking a little bit, but those were because of one-time costs due to opening Epic Universe. Now they're expanding again. They treat their people right. They treat their guests right, and I think you're seeing that long-term reward. I also think it's why the cruise line cruise line industries have been so successful coming out of the pandemic. That price value expectation is being met or exceeded by all the lines, whether it's a value line all the way up to the premium line, and that industry has seen crazy growth and new ships and new keys, and the US theme park industry's kind of been stuck in the doldrums post-COVID, right? There was a lot of profit that happened thanks to the revenge spending, where guests were willing to buy fast passes and buy ECVs and maybe get the double cheeseburger instead of the single. But the volume hasn't recovered for the average theme park in the US. And I think it's because some of that bottom line chasing may be a little too prevalent, particularly in the publicly traded firms. And they're just not quite aligned, right? They're obviously, for the most part, still making money and still on the upswing, but the volume hasn't returned yet. And in my personal opinion, until they get that kind of simple equation right, which is super hard to execute on, easy game plan, a lot harder to go out and trust in the long term and do all kind of the little things right, repeatedly. But until they kind of get back to that kind of core hospitality philosophy, I think the volume is going to continue to struggle to return to pre-pandemic levels.
One of the things that what you're talking about makes me think of are people that I've heard of where they have, maybe it's a family entertainment center and they're noticing, maybe because of the pandemic, maybe because of other market factors, that they've got fewer guests in there. And so now they're trying to, lower their labor costs. So they have fewer people in there. That affects the guest experience. And then it's that, I call it a downward spiral, right?
Yeah, it's a death spiral. Yeah.
Absolutely. So from a financial standpoint, like, what is your outlook on something like that? If you were to consult with somebody and say, here, this is what I'm seeing, like, what are the financial pieces of advice or, guidance that you would provide?
Yeah. It kind of goes back to, there's some cliches you throw out there, but you can't save your way to prosperity, right? It's super challenging when you're in the face of, hey, I'm not going to be able to make payroll this week, or I've got X amount of months left. But that's where firms, whether it's an individual FEC or a 40 or 50 park theme park firm, need to do the hard work in evaluating what their value and what their perceived value is in the market, and work to align with what their guests are expecting on the individual levels. I don't think there's going to be a one size fit all answer for every struggling firm. And I know there's, again, the super big guys are kind of struggling on volume right now. And I know FECs across the country are too. It's becoming hyper competitive. You look at localized entertainment, it's becoming, with the various competitive socialization products that have gone out there, F1 Arcade, Flight Club, there's a lot of competition out there. And I think it comes down to, the easy button is absolutely reduce hours, reduce labor. Those start to become expensive pennies though when you're losing your core market. So it's doing a full scale evaluation and trying to realign where that value perception is for your product and start to deliver on that, whatever that new normal is.
So Tyler, we have just a couple of minutes left here, starting to wind down here, but there is one thing that you mentioned that I wonder if you could expand on. You talked about the park struggling to rebound from COVID in terms of volume, and that they'll continue to struggle unless they get back to that core hospitality philosophy. And I wonder if you can expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of this is my opinion, right? But I think I think one of the kind of negative aspects of the modern theme park is, as firms have become publicly traded and as their debt levels have kind of, risen due to, a variety of circumstances, one of them being the pandemic where, the whole country shut down for, depending on where you lived, anywhere from, 4 months to, 18 months. I think there's been kind of too much of a focus on the short term, the quarterly results, and not enough focus on maintaining a consistent product that provides steady returns in the long run. I've got blog posts out there where I was praising the Six Flags and Cedar Fair merger. I still think it was the right move. I think the game plan that they came out with when they first, announced the merger was the right game plan. I just don't think they executed on that plan. I think for whatever reason, whether it was internal factors or the board or whatever, they seem to not really, stick to that vision and that focus, and started making knee-jerk reactions and cutting park hours and announcing park closures and shutting rides, and kind of really quickly got into, like, Matt said, that negative feedback loop real quickly. And now they're kind of back to square one, kind of searching for their identity. So yeah, I think, the problems the big boys are kind of seeing right now are fixable. I don't think it's a 6, 12, 24-month fix, right? I think we're going to need someone to come in and kind of say, here's the 5-year game plan, and really stick to that and execute on it. And it can be super hard, right? When the micro results are maybe not all up. It's tough to have the conviction to execute on that plan. But I think until, we do, or someone does, I think you're going to kind of see this, kind of sideward drifting of the major firms.
Well, and I think you're right. Not even studying the financials like you have, but just seeing kind of the trends of some of the different parks out there and things like that, in terms of, are we, chasing that very expensive penny at the detriment of our long-term success. So I think you're absolutely right. Tyler, this has been a fascinating conversation. I know I am financially smarter because of it, so thank you very much for that.
Absolutely.
If anybody wanted to learn more about COTALAND or get in touch with you directly, where would you send them?
Yeah, so COTALAND, COTALAND.com, and just to get the marketing plug, COTALAND is all capitalized now. So when referencing it, it's nice and easy, all capital letters. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Tyler Rizzo on LinkedIn. My mugshot will be up there, so happy to connect, and always looking to grow the network in positive ways, and meet new individuals and help people where I can.
Awesome. Tyler, I will echo Matt's sentiment that I feel financially smarter after the last 45 minutes or so. So really appreciate the opportunity to share some time with us, tell us all about not just finance, but also talk about COTALAND too. Really exciting to be anticipating a new theme park opening in the United States in the near future. So we really appreciate it. Can't wait to get there. And for everyone out there who is watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.